Hi, thanks for joining. I'm going to repeat everything again. This is Miss Melinda here, your spiritual worker from Miss Melinda's metaphysicalservices.com, here to bring you our live spirit chat, which is a chance for you to participate in a group coaching session, a free coaching session, and get your questions answered about developing your spiritual path, developing your psychic abilities, developing your intuition, building your spiritual practice, working with your ancestors, your spirit guides, your guardian spirits, doing dream work, practicing magic, folk magic, divination, and all kinds of things related and in between. I see that I've got one question here. Can you tell me about Leo? And I'm imagining that you are talking about the sign, the astrological sun sign of Leo. So I can tell you a little bit about Leo, but I can tell you that all of the astrological signs have kind of a light side and a shadow side, just like everything else in life, just like a tarot card or pretty much anything that you can think of, right? We've got that balance of light and shadow, of yin and yang, of the moon and the sun and so forth. So Leo is a very heart-centric sign. It's a sign related to your heart, related to your heart chakra, related to your inner child, related to your emotions. It's a very emotional sign. And when Leo is in shadow form, meaning that it is expressing itself in a person who hasn't worked on their heart healing or who hasn't done the kind of emotional growth and emotional progress that is needed, then, it can express itself in a negative way, in selfishness, in egoism, in low self-confidence, and all of those things that you would associate with possibly having issues with emotional connection, all of the things you would associate with having a blocked heart chakra, things of that nature. Leos tend to be very, very sensitive. I'm a Leo, it's my sun sign, so maybe I'm speaking from a biased position, but I find Leos to be very sensitive, very emotional. I find relationships and emotions to be at the center of importance for Leo. I find emotional connection to be very important for Leo. And that's just a little bit about Leo. I'm not really an astrologer, so I can help you to the best of my ability, but if you have a specific question about Leo, I might be able to help you a little bit better, or I could point you in the right direction because I do have some astrologers that I love and that I go to. Okay, so I see a familiar face. Thanks for being here. And the question is, I'm looking into growing and strengthening my intuition for reasons. What are some ways I can develop my intuition? So the very first thing that I always tell everybody about developing their intuition is that you should begin with a meditation practice. And I always laugh when I say it because I prescribe a meditation practice for pretty much everything. But the reason why is because meditation works for pretty much everything. Especially everything, related to spiritual development and spiritual practice. So what is going to happen when you develop a regular meditation practice is that you are going to become much more aware of yourself. You're going to become much more aware of your own thoughts. You're going to become much more aware of how your intuition works. You're going to become much more aware of your feelings. You're going to become aware in general, but the awareness is not specifically directed outward. It's more directed inward, which is the kind of awareness you need to develop your intuition, because a big part of being connected with your intuition and actually using your intuition is recognizing it and understanding how it works. So that means that you recognize that your intuition works mostly with your sense of hearing or your sense of sight. So that would be clairaudience or clairvoyance. You recognize that your intuition is associated strongly with the feelings, the physical sensations in your body. That would be clairsentience, right? It would be having intuitions, insights, psychic abilities through your actual feelings. So that's one of the things that meditation is going to allow you to become aware of, like how it actually works for you. And then once you understand that, the sensations that you have or the things that transpire surrounding your intuition, then you can begin to recognize it. You can begin to see the patterns, and you can begin to really understand when your intuition is speaking to you. You'll be able to differentiate between your intuition and your anxiety, for instance, your intuition and your worry, things of that nature. So that's why a meditation practice is really useful for developing your intuition. Going a step further, there are many other things that you can do, but the first and most important thing is just to recognize how it works for you as an individual, because then you can focus on developing that specific skill specifically for you. As I said, clairsentience, clairaudience, things of that nature. So another thing that you can start to do, another great thing to do in the beginning when you're developing, is to start keeping a journal and take it seriously. Take each intuition that you have seriously. Write it down in your spiritual journal. Write down the date that the intuition occurred to you. Write down how it occurred to you. Write down what the intuition was about. And then check back later and see when you were right. And you'll be amazed at how often you were right. And you will be amazed at how quickly you can start to put together that pattern of how it works for you, so you can really put it to use and use it. And then sometimes some of the foundational things that are needed to really use your intuition include trusting yourself. Because if you don't trust yourself, if you're not confident with yourself, then it is difficult to also trust your intuition. So those are just some beginner tips. And if you have any follow-up questions about that, please do let me know. You're welcome, Linda's daughter. I'm glad that answer was helpful to you. She says, wow, thanks so much. That was dead on about Leo. I'm glad that was useful information. If you have any follow-up questions, be sure to let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. I did my cards today and pulled the same cards twice about the same questions. I'm new in my spiritual journey. So you're new in your spiritual journey, and it sounds like maybe you're new to using cards. And that what you're describing is a very typical situation. That is very typical of using the cards, that if a piece of guidance or a piece of information or a piece of insight is really truly meant for you, it will come up more than once. You can pull the card several times sometimes and get the same card over and over again, no matter how much you shuffle. And that's the universe really telling you, like, yes, this is the answer. This is the guidance for you. Please pay attention. So that's a really nice synchronicity for you to have had. And I hope that the guidance that you're getting from the cards is something that you're able to objectively decipher and apply to your life. And I hope that it's something that's really useful for you. So if you haven't been here before, because I'm not sure how many people have joined, if you haven't been here before, our live spirit chats are a chance for you to participate in a live, free group coaching session and get your questions answered about developing your spiritual practice, developing your spiritual path, developing your intuition and your psychic abilities, trusting and using your intuition, making magic, folk magic, fire magic, candle magic, divination, working with your spirit guides, working with your ancestors, and all kinds of things related and in between. So I am here for you to answer any questions you may have about developing your spiritual path and developing your spiritual practice and developing yourself. And I am happy to answer your questions to the best of my ability. I always look forward to these chats, and I always love interacting with you. You're welcome, Linda's daughter. Blessings to you as well. So, very early this morning, I had a random thought. About James Gunn getting reinstated by Disney, and I learned 2 hours ago that it actually happened. Awesome. So your intuition is really working Mine works for me that way as well, quite often. And once you start to recognize the kind of randomness of those thoughts, like how out of place those thoughts are, then you recognize, hey, that's intuition, or actually, I would call that a psychic ability. That is a latent psychic ability that can be developed. Oftentimes, what we understand as strong intuition is actually a latent psychic ability that does have the potential to be developed, explored, and used further. And what you're describing, I would really call a psychic ability. But the point is, once you start to recognize the way that those thoughts come just out of nowhere, relating to nothing that is going on in the world around you, relating to nothing you're currently experiencing or doing or contemplating, then you start to really pick up on the pattern of how those psychic insights happen for you. And that's predictive psychic ability, right? So once you can recognize that, then in the future, when those keep coming to you, you'll know, like, hey, I'm having a predictive thought right now. I'm predicting something that's going to happen. And that's interesting. No, he says, I know that doesn't sound like much, but I've actually had multiple experiences like this growing up, and I can never tell if it's just coincidence or not. No, it's not coincidence. First of all, you've had multiple experiences like this, right? So that's not coincidence. Second of all, something actually came into fruition for you. You have solid evidence. It's not coincidence. You have a latent psychic ability. This is very common of people who have these kinds of psychic abilities, especially very common of people who have clairaudience. Clairaudience is when the information comes to you through sound. And we usually think that that means that it's going to be a sound from outside of us, as in it's going to sound just like another person speaking to us. But most often, clairaudience is an actual voice inside our heads that sounds different than our own thoughts, but is coming to us in a very similar way that our own thoughts do. And for people with clairaudience, it's very, very common to second guess it and question it and doubt it. That's actually a very strong characteristic of somebody who has clairaudience, to spend a lot of time second guessing and doubting, and therefore maybe not get as much out of their gift as they could. So if that's you, don't feel alone, because that happens to a lot of people. How do you work with your ancestors? That's a big question. I'm going to take a sip of tea. So if you're starting from the very beginning with working with your ancestors, the first thing that you do is set up a spot where you are going to speak to them, hopefully every day, but if not, then you need to commit to at least one day a week. And this doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be a big fancy altar. It doesn't have to be something that is difficult to set up. It can be a coffee table. It can be a nightstand. Actually, I don't recommend it in your bedroom, though. I recommend that it's someplace else in your home. And if you're going to put down a cloth or a covering of some sort, then it should be white. And you can even just put like a white handkerchief on the floor, in a corner of the floor, and clean it first in a clean space that you're kind of dedicating and setting aside to them. But very simple. A white cloth, a fresh glass of water, and maybe one white candle, maybe some incense. You don't even have to have the candle, and you don't have to have the incense, but you should have some kind of an offering. And then you start talking to them every day, and you start by offering them thanks. You start by offering them gratitude. You let them know that you're thankful for everything that they have done so far and everything that they will do in the future, everything that they've done before you, all the roads that they've opened before you that have allowed you to live the life that you want, everything that they've done, known and unknown. You're thankful to all ancestors, known and unknown, for everything they've passed on to you, your unique characteristics, the wisdom they've passed on to you, the experiences they've passed on to you. You're just all the ways that you are grateful to them. You're offering them gratitude, loyalty, and respect, and you're asking nothing of them. And no, you do not have to have one individual ancestor that you are trying to connect with and that you are building a relationship with. You start by thanking your ancestors in general, letting them know that they have a place in your home, they have a place in your heart, letting them know that you wish to develop, strengthen, and solidify a relationship with them. You do that for a long time until you feel intuitively that something has changed, or until you receive a message from them or from one of them that it is time to move that relationship forward. And then at that time, you're going to want to do some more research or get some more assistance in moving that relationship forward. And let me know if you have any follow-up questions about that. So Yadi is asking, in your opinion, what's the difference between being a spiritualist and being an espiritista? Well, it's a cultural difference, first of all, and a spiritualist traditionally, this is a highly debated topic. There's a lot of controversy around it, but I'll give you the basics. Spiritualism was invented by a man named Allan Kardec, but it is influenced by traditional spiritualism, which comes from other countries and, Afro-Caribbean cultures. Spiritism is part of the African diaspora. So it's traveled all over the world, everywhere that the slaves have traveled. And then it's settled in new places and been influenced by those new places and developed into different traditions accordingly, according to the way that traditions have influenced one another. So spiritualism is something that was happening in the United States and was heavily influenced by Europeans, but it was influenced by Espiritism. And I'm not saying that right because my Spanish is terrible and I know that. And then what happened is the American people in the United States who came from other cultures who practiced Espiritismo were then influenced by spiritualism, and then the two influenced one another. So Espiritismo became influenced by spiritualism, which was originally influenced by the original practices, which came from other places. So it's a huge conglomeration of practices influencing one another. But the main difference is cultural. If you have specific questions about that, or if I didn't answer your question the way that you needed me to, then let me know. I'm willing to elaborate on that to the best of my ability. Espiritismo has been American Espiritismo, okay, has been heavily influenced by spiritualism, which was already influenced by practices from the African diaspora in other countries like Brazil and Cuba, right? So there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of ins and outs, and the biggest differences are going to be cultural. It's going to be the heritage that you grew up in, or the kinds of people that lived in the area where you learned these traditions, things of that nature. So for instance, here in Texas, there are very specific practices in spiritualism, and as well as in Espiritismo, that are not that popular in other places. America is such a big place, so we have practices that are regional as well. For instance, in New Orleans, the spiritualism is heavily interrelated with American voodoo, or New Orleans style voodoo. So there's a lot of different things to be taken into consideration. Are you saying, yes, my Spanish is horrible? You're laughing at me. My altar is in my bedroom closet. Should I move it? No, if it's in your closet, then you don't have to move it because you can close the doors. The reason I was saying that an ancestor altar shouldn't be in your bedroom is because in many traditions, the tradition is that you should not get naked in front of your ancestor altar. You should not have sex in front of your ancestor altar. So that's why you don't want it in your bedroom. So if you can close those altar doors and make yourself private, then that can still be acceptable. I don't know who you're working with or what your tradition is, so it really depends heavily upon what your practice is at your altar as well. For many years, I had an altar in my bedroom and it worked well. Ever since we started working on my situation, it feels like my intuition has increased, but also because of the situation. Sometimes it's hard to tell intuition from emotions. Yeah, it is really hard. So what he is talking about is that we've been doing some spiritual work together. I've been doing some spiritual work on his behalf. And since I have been doing that, he has felt that he has had some very strong intuitions, that he's had some very strong synchronicities, that he's had a lot of very strong signs in his life. I will say that the spiritual work does have a tendency to increase those kinds of things for people, as well as occurrences in their dream lives. I will also say that part of this is probably because you're paying closer attention, right? And then the second part was, it's hard to tell my intuition apart from my emotions. Yeah, it is for a lot of people, but especially when you're going through a very emotional time, it's very normal to have trouble distinguishing your emotions from your intuition when you're going through a difficult time. So that's one of the reasons that I recommend a meditation practice, because it's going to help you center. It's going to help you be more aware of how you're feeling, what you're thinking, and it's just going to offer you more clarity, and it will be easier over time to tell your intuition away from your emotions. Hi, nice to see you. Thank you for joining, Domestic Butler. Is there a difference in how you work with spirits? You mean in Spiritismo versus Spiritualism? So I am not an expert on Spiritismo. I am doing mainly Spiritualism, but I do participate in misas with a group of mediums regularly here in Austin, Texas, and there's a lot of overlap of the traditions within that group, and within our practices. There's a lot of overlap of Spiritismo and Spiritualism. But because I'm not an expert on Spiritismo, I don't know exactly what all of the specific influences are. The main difference that I see is that there's a difference in the kinds of spirits that you work with. But where I am and with the people that I congregate with and practice with, and the people that have taught me, there's overlap with that as well. So the types of spirits are usually different. The real traditional spiritualists coming from that Kardashian tradition, they are mostly going to be working with like angels and spirit guides and saints and ancestors and personal guides, things of that nature. Whereas with Spiritismo, there are courts or families of spirits that come from all over the world. And a lot of people don't know this. They come from all over the world. So there's not just an African family of spirits, there's a Chinese family of spirits. There's a Hindu family of spirits. There's a bunch of different families of spirits that come from all over the world. And what I find is that tends to be more specific to Spiritismo rather than to Spiritualism. That's one of the biggest differences. The other differences, from my current perspective, the other differences that I see are in some slight differences in ritual preparation. I'm using the term ritual. These are important things to distinguish when you're talking about these kinds of practices, or when you're talking about magic. I'm not talking about ritual as in a magical ritual. I'm talking about ritual as in something that is a habit that you repeat each time. or a habit that you repeat at a certain time, a habit that you repeat for a specific purpose. So the rituals that I'm talking about in terms of a spiritismo or spiritualism are the motions that you go through in order to begin and close your ceremony, in order to interact with your spirits, things of that nature. So there are going to be some nuances there. There are going to be some differences in those rituals, but it's not huge. There's a lot of overlap. What about Santa Muerta? What about Santa Muerta? Let me know if you have a specific question. I'm not an expert on her. She has been a little bit in my life. She has been a little bit in my work. I wouldn't proclaim myself to be an expert on her. I can most likely answer specific questions if you have them. Most Holy Death, yes. You weren't laughing at my Spanish? Yeah, I know about Santa Muerta. Let me know if you have specific questions about her. Oh, someone is knocking at my door. I'm not going to be answering it. Hopefully it's nothing important. Yeti says yes to the clairaudience, second guessing. Yeah, it's a strong characteristic of clairaudience. It's because it's in your head. And people who are clairaudient have a lot of really great strengths, and one of them is being analytical. Being analytical tends to be a characteristic of clairaudience. So it's a natural inclination to think about things and try to dissect it and try to figure it out, right? And then when you combine that with like having a voice in your head that you're like, is this really intuition? Is this really a psychic ability, or is this just one of my thoughts? Am I tricking myself? Like, it's really easy to get into a tailspin if you don't just center yourself and decide that you're going to believe. You're welcome, Linda's daughter. I'm glad it's helpful. Thank you for the responses and the advice. You are welcome. Linda, hi, Linda. Nice to see you here. That was a pleasant surprise. Okay, I'm still learning in my walk, meaning I believe in God, but I also believe in the universe, the earth, the sun, moon, and stars. A lot of things have happened in my life. I believe my aunt was a spiritual being. Very interesting. It sounds like you're at a wonderful point in developing your spiritual path. And it sounds as if you are doing some really great contemplating and some really great thinking about what your personal beliefs are and how those are going to shape your path and shape your practices. And I do want to make it clear that practicing any kind of magic or even practicing any kind of development of your spirituality or even spiritual work, that is a practice. It is not a religion. So you are definitely free to combine that practice with any spiritual belief or any religion and whatever works for you. So keep that in mind. And even if you decide that you want to practice witchcraft or practice magic, it doesn't mean that that God has no place in it, and it doesn't mean that those two things are not compatible. This is all about what works for you. And my mom, a lot of things I have to learn, but I have a lot of feelings and emotion. I see a lot of spirits and feel them. Wonderful. It sounds like you have a lot of spiritual gifts that are developing. And I would definitely encourage you to do some of the things that we've been speaking about today here in our chat. Start a meditation practice. Start working with your ancestors the way that I described. Start keeping that spiritual journal to keep track of your intuitions, keep track of your psychic insights, and see how that tracks for you, see how that works out. I'm definitely wishing you all of the best on your journey. Sounds like you've had some wonderful development happening for you at this time. Yeah, meditation is also really great to connect with your ancestors, but there's a difference between meditation and spiritual contemplation. When you are sitting at your altar and you're sitting quietly and you are purposefully intent on communicating with and connecting with your ancestors, that's a different thing than meditation, really. But sitting quietly, going inward, and actually listening for their guidance, listening for their insights, listening for their advice, listening for their voices after you speak to them and ask them for guidance or offer them prayers of gratitude, that's really important. You're not going to be able to hear back from them unless you give yourself space and quiet and time to actually relax and receive those messages and receive that information. So thank you for bringing that up, Yadi. That is really important. But having a meditation practice in general, it is definitely going to help you connect with your ancestors, as well as helping you with all of these things in general in the long run. You're welcome, Linda's daughter. I'm glad that it's helpful for you. So it looks like we've been on for about a half hour now. And if there's anyone who hasn't been here before, I know my YouTube people probably haven't been here before. Our live spirit chats are a chance for you to participate in a group coaching session and really get your questions answered about developing your spiritual path, developing your spiritual connection, developing your spiritual practice, developing your intuition, developing your psychic abilities, practicing magic, folk magic, fire magic, working with saints, guardian angels, ancestors, divination and folk magic, fire magic, and all kinds of things related and in between. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. And this time is really a time for you. Hi, thanks for joining. I think I do have a couple of announcements. I was so distracted with getting the YouTube channel set up at the beginning that I didn't do my announcements, which I usually do. So my first announcement is that this coming Sunday, I will be at the Buzzmill Full Moon Market for the Austin Witches Market, and I will be offering readings there. I have great discounted readings that I offer for those markets for a face-to-face reading. The witches markets are really fun and great place to meet all kinds of people and see all kinds of interesting vendors and partake of all kinds of cool handmade goods on sale from all of the local Austin witches. So you can find me there on Sunday, this coming Sunday. I don't have my calendar in front of me, so I'm not sure of the date, but it's this coming Sunday. It's at the Austin Buzzmill, and it is from 7 p.m. until midnight. So if you've been wanting to get a face-to-face reading with me, this is a great time to come and get a discounted reading face-to-face. I'd love to see you there. And then on Wednesday, the following Wednesday, our full moon group spiritual service is happening. If you are a part of my Patreon services, my Patreon page is where you get to participate in my group spiritual services, as well as group readings, free guided meditations, and all kinds of other bonus material, including a 3-part course that I have available right now on spell casting and magic making. So participating in group services happens there, but you can also participate outside of the Patreon services if you would like to. The full moon service coming up on Wednesday is dedicated to Saint Joseph. His feast day is on the 19th, and I believe the full moon is on the 20th. So I will begin to honor him on his feast day on the 19th, and then our main portion of the full moon service will take place the following day. If you have questions about any of these things, go ahead and drop me an email. It's inquiries@missmelinda.com. Inquiries@missmelinda.com. There is also an email button, a little blue or purple button underneath the highlights on my Instagram profile. Email is also linked on YouTube underneath each and every video. So go ahead and drop me a line if you have questions about any of those things or you would like to join the group service. And I think I see some new faces here. Thank you for coming. It's nice to see you. It's usually not just about my announcements. It's usually the I didn't expect all of the smoke to go right in front of us. It's like the wind just changed. So this is a chance to participate in a group coaching session and ask me any questions that you might have about your spiritual practice, developing your own spiritual connection, developing your own spiritual path, perhaps any kinds of abilities that you have growing or that you're just beginning to experience, anything that's budding inside of you, any questions that you have about your intuition, trusting and using your intuition, any questions that you have about some suspicions of psychic abilities you might have, developing and honing in on your latent psychic abilities. Maybe you have questions about practicing candle magic, casting spells, fire magic. Perhaps you're interested in working with your guardian angels or your ancestors. Perhaps you're interested in building a connection with your spirit guides. These are the kind of questions that I am here to answer. I can also talk to you about divination and tarot and all kinds of things related and in between. So please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I'm here for you to answer those. Let me move this incense. It's like I can't even see you all now. And it's just this little rope incense that I have lit. And usually when they start burning, it's just a little kind of tendril of smoke. And this time it's like it just erupted into a giant cloud, which is I'm finding really amusing. This incense is handmade by monks in the mountains of Tibet, and it has a few different kinds of sandalwood in it, and I really love it. It's a lovely offering. If any of you have ever wondered if incense can be used as an offering to your deities or your spirit guides, your guardian spirits, or even your ancestors, incense makes a really beautiful offering. Okay, I've got a question. How do I find out who I was in past lives? So there are lots of ways that you can go about that. A lot of people do past life regression. That would probably be the number one thing that I recommend, is that you find somebody very trustworthy who specializes in past life regression and contact them. See about getting that done. Other people also do hypnotism. I believe that past life regression typically involves a form of hypnotism, but there are also hypnotists separate who would do a similar thing, probably with a slightly separate technique. You can definitely get a reading to look into those kinds of things, but I wouldn't recommend that you go just to any, like any tarot reader, for instance, because it would need to be somebody who has some experience with this topic specifically and somebody who is comfortable with it. I guess what I would say is to get a kind of, get a feel for their reading style and kind of the perspective that they're coming at in their readings, or the approach that they're coming from in their readings, before you decide to ask them to look into your past life. I don't think that it would be something that's suitable for just every kind of reader, but I think that some tarot readers would be suitable for that. And there are probably all kinds of other readers who could assist with that as well, like a very skilled psychic. Again, psychics, just like tarot readers, have different areas of specialty and different things that they are more likely to see, or different things that they're more likely to tune into. So you would want to probably ask some questions and read some reviews and read their bio and kind of get to know what style they have, what kinds of things they specialize in, etc. Yeah, like I just said, you want to get to know some things about them before you get a reading. There are some really telltale signs of people that are scammers, and let me think of some of them. I can't believe this incense got so crazy today. So generally speaking, people who scam people are going to make really broad, like really far reaching, really big proclamations. They're going to claim that they can do all kinds of really astonishing things. They're going to say things like, I can erase memories, I can control minds, I can remove thoughts and put new thoughts in your mind, or I can remove thoughts from someone else and put new thoughts in them. You know, things of this nature. It's going to be, scammers are typically people who make really huge claims about what they can do. They are also typically people who feed on fear, and they feed on the stuff that they know that people want and need the most. So they will focus on things like curses. They will focus on things like love, and they will focus on things like money, and they will make big claims like, do you want to know if you're going to get rich? Well, I can tell you, I can help you figure out if you're going to get rich. Or I can help you win the lottery. Or, you know, I can spot your generational curses and tell you how to remove them. So those are some of the characteristics, like people who feed on fear and people who make big claims about themselves. Someone who is not a scam you're going to be able to know what they look like. You're going to see pictures of their face. You're going to see photos of them doing their work or in their studio or something of that nature. You're going to see some testimonials or some reviews. You're going to see some public profiles. You're going to be able to look them up in different places, websites, social media, etc. And on those websites and social media, you're going to be able to see what they look like. You're going to be able to see reviews, and you're going to be able to see things that looks like someone is actually interacting from a personal level. So those are some ways that you can avoid being scammed. Now, there are also some really reputable psychic companies out there. I have worked for a couple that were very reputable and that were very on the up and up. But also through that work, I know of other companies that are not reputable and that are not on the up and up. So, you know, another thing that you can do is just kind of ask around and ask what people's experiences are, ask what the reputation is of the psychic networks, etc. But, you know, if you believe in this stuff and you believe that you've had past lives and you're looking to better yourself and you're looking to get some kind of guidance, and you already kind of believe in this spiritual world and you believe in psychic abilities, then at some point or another, you're going to have to open yourself up a little bit more and have some faith and have some trust that there are legitimate people out here who do this work and who are here to help you, right? Because we are. So my twin passed right before birth. I never got to know the sex, and all record of the birth are gone. Would a psychic be able to answer those kinds of questions for me? Yes, a good psychic would be able to answer those kinds of questions for you. You may want to get in touch with a medium for that. Somebody who can see and communicate with the dead, or somebody who has a relationship with death and a relationship with the dead. Yeah, I strongly recommend a medium for that, but I also feel that in a tarot reading, you would be able to decipher those things. I've been able to decipher things like that in a tarot reading. So I think that a good reader, there's all kinds of good readers that could help you with that. What is a good recommendation on protecting oneself from people looking to hurt you in the workplace? So people are out to get you in the workplace. Is this like you need to protect your job? Or is this more like you want to protect yourself from gossip and slander or like bullying? Yes, mediums and psychics are different. I can get into that a little bit in a moment. So protecting yourself from gossip and slander, I'm trying to think of a protection charm that you could carry with you. But what I would do is burn a tapaboca candle, which is a shut up candle. And I always have great success with those. So I would recommend that you get yourself a Tapaboca candle and burn that at home to get people to shut up and stop talking about you, especially if the way that they are talking about you is intended to take credit away from you or to harm your job in some way. Protecting yourself from bullies in the workplace, the way that I would approach that would be to ask for assistance from a guardian spirit or a spirit guide and ask them to be with you in the workplace and protect you from that bullying. I would also do a cleansing. I'm getting a sense of a salt cleansing. I would do a salt bath. There are charms and things that you could carry with you to the workplace to help assist you, especially like if you had a desk or something where you can stash things away. And unfortunately, it's just not coming to my mind at this time. I like to do a conker jar as well. And a conker jar keeps in it a piece of camphor and a high john root, as well as a couple of other herbs and roots. And you can easily adapt that to a charm bag. Use a piece of camphor and a high john root. And a paper petition. I would recommend putting that in a charm bag, a red flannel bag, and taking that to the workplace with you. Now that's more involved than it may sound, because you want to work with those roots. You want to pray to them. You want to ask them to work on your behalf. You want to charge them. You want to get that spiritually blessed. You don't want to just take those ingredients and throw them together. So one of the reasons that I'm mentioning the candles first or the prayers first is because it's actually a more accessible and in some cases more accessible, and in some cases a quicker way to get your results, especially if you're praying in conjunction with those candles. Linda, I hope you're still here and that you're enjoying the video. You're enjoying the live session. I thought maybe you would have some questions for me, but I'm just really happy to see you here. That's great advice. Wonderful. You could work on energy boundaries too, envisioning, developing, and strengthening your energy barrier aura. Yeah, I would recommend that. I would also specifically recommend that if you felt that the energy or the emotions of the people were strongly affecting you. And you were getting very emotional, or you were getting very upset at work, then that would tell me that you should work on your energy barriers for sure. But one of the reasons that I suggested working with a guardian angel or guardian spirit to protect you at work would be that they would offer some of that additional energetic protection for you. Because oftentimes when we're being bullied, when we're being targeted, especially if it has the potential to put our work in jeopardy, this is a very stressful situation. We may be feeling very down. We need that extra kind of boost, that extra energy, that extra spiritual support to help protect us, to help imbue and strengthen our own energy, so that it's not all just coming from you, so that you're getting some assistance and some support. Yeah, I would definitely recommend that you pray the Psalms as well for protection for sure. And there's a million different ones. There's a million different ones that you can use for protection, and there's a million different ones that you can use for actually removing the negative energy or reversing the negative energy, for protection, for removing ill intentions, for protection against enemies, etc. So you can get more pointed with that if you need to or you would like to. Thanks for joining. If you haven't been here before, our live spirit chat is a chance for you to participate in a group coaching session and to ask questions regarding developing your spiritual path, developing your spiritual practice, developing your psychic abilities, your intuition, working with your guardian spirits, working with your guardian angels, your ancestors, your spirit guides, practicing magic, practicing candle magic, doing dream work, divination, tarot, and all kinds of things related and in between. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me, and I am happy to answer them to the best of my ability. I think that just about every time I do these live sessions, I see new faces, I see new people, and I'm always really excited about that. I'm always happy to see those of you that I already know. I always look forward to interacting with you and to having these chats and answering your questions. I love the conversation that we have, and it's also really exciting to have new people hanging out and asking questions too. It looks like we've got about 10 minutes left, so don't be shy. Let me know if you have any questions. We've been talking about all kinds of things today. We've been talking about spiritualism and espiritismo. We've been talking about protecting ourselves from bullies in the workplace. We've been talking about energy work and meditation. We've been talking about clairaudience. We've been talking about meditation. We've been talking about how to tell the difference between meditation, between your intuition and your emotions. We've been talking about synchronicity and seeing signs. We've been talking about developing specific spiritual paths and how to set up ancestor altars, among other things. So we've covered some far-reaching topics. And with just a little less than 10 minutes left, I'm happy to take a couple more questions. So it looks like everybody's all chatted out, so I'm going to go ahead and close it up for today. For those of you who are not familiar, I try to do these spirit chats once a week, and I do announce them ahead of time. I'm doing them live on YouTube as well as on Instagram now, and they are announced in advance, usually 1 to 2 days, maybe a little bit more in advance. So I will be happy to see you in the future. I got here late. I'll have to watch the beginning to see if my question was answered. If you had an early submission question, I did not receive it, so I'm not sure that it was answered. But this will be saved for 24 hours on Instagram, and it'll be saved forever or until YouTube doesn't exist anymore. It'll be saved on YouTube as well, so you can check those two places. You're welcome. I'm glad it was helpful for you. And just to reiterate, I did have a couple of announcements that I mentioned today as well. One is our full moon group spiritual service coming up next week, dedicated to St. Joseph. It is St. Joseph's feast day, corresponding very closely with the full moon. I am offering a group spiritual service for that. That's part of my Patreon services, but you do not have to be a patron in order to participate. You can also participate in an individual service. Feel free to drop me a line if you're interested in that. The other thing that I announced is that I will be giving readings here in Austin at the Buzz Mill for the Austin Witches Market Full Moon Market. My face-to-face readings at those markets are at a very reasonable rate, and I always look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much for joining, everybody. I really appreciate your wonderful questions, and I really appreciate interacting with you. Thank you so much, and stay blessed.